You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for being here today. I'm Kirk Mona, and joining me are Rachel Gimza and Victoria Thompson. We're all naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders, just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Really good to be here this week. Up here in the Northern Hemisphere, spring is springing, coming on fast. Yeah, things are greening up, and I, for one, am quite excited about it. I know some people are sad to see winter go, but spring is a really fun time. And Rachel is not here with us this week. As she mentioned last week, she is currently fulfilling a lifelong dream and visiting California to see the coastal redwood trees. Yes, as we speak,
communing with the redwoods.
That's really exciting. I'm sure she'll be posting some photos to Instagram here by the time you guys hear this. So last week, she detailed all the ways they are amazing. And one of the things she mentioned is that they can live to be up to 2,000 years old, which is just absolutely ridiculously long. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think of the whole height thing, but the age thing is pretty amazing too. And I know that the sequoias can get a little bit older than that. But naturally, it got me thinking, while we were recording, I wrote down this week's topic during the middle of that recording session, because I instantly knew what my topic had to be this week. I've seen coastal redwoods, and they certainly are amazing. But there's another tree that can live even longer, and it's what I want to talk about. It is the amazing Bristlecone pine. Yep. So
there we go.
We do need to start off first with some disambiguation, because once again, common names have failed us here. There is no one singular species known as just the bristlecone pine. There's actually a complex of 3 trees that are known as the Bristlecone Pines collectively. So we'll kind of dive into these here. Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't know that. And there's a reason why we'll kind of get into. So these 3 distinct species of pines are geographically distinct. There's really no overlap at all in their ranges. I guess I was reading they can actually hybridize. So if you buy like a bristlecone pine at a garden center, which you can, although I did once see one here in Minnesota at a garden center, which is not a common sight to see. It was maybe a foot tall, and they wanted about $950 for it, which I thought was a little high for my for my taste. But in the wild, the ranges don't overlap at all. So even though technically they can hybridize, I think, I don't know if I said out loud, like the ones you find in a garden center may be a hybrid because they can hybridize, but the ones in the wild, there's really an overlap in their ranges. One can imagine that long ago, when the climate was different, they may have existed in more places and there could have been more overlap, or even they could have all just been one species. But that was a really long time ago, and they've since split off, and now we can tell that they are indeed different species, whatever that term means these days. The smallest gap between any of these species is 160 miles, which isn't really all that far in the grand scheme of things, but a lot of them are much further apart than that. So the first one. Yeah, probably.
160 miles over a mountain.
Because these are definitely a mountainous species. First up, we have the foxtail pine, Pinus balfouriana. This is technically a bristlecone pine, though it doesn't necessarily go by that moniker. It's one of the 3. The oldest known foxtail pine is 2,110 years old, though some scientists believe that they theoretically could live up to be 3,000 years old. Like there's maybe no reason they couldn't live that long, but the oldest one we have documented right now is 2,110. These trees have an absolutely tiny range up in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. So they're not found in very many spots. So next up is a tree with bristlecone pine right there in the name. It is the Rocky Mountain bristlecone pine, Pinus aristata. and they have a much wider range, being found in parts of Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, again, high up in mountains. And this is a species of bristlecone pine that I've been lucky enough to see in person. I was out in Colorado on a family trip, and we took a drive to Mount Blue Sky. And along the Mount Blue Sky Scenic Highway, you can visit the Mount Goliath Natural Area that I highly recommend anybody check out if you're at all in the area. You can basically hike through a forest of bristlecone pines at an elevation of 11,540 feet. And one of the really cool things about the ones there is you basically can just drive up in the parking lot and you're like, oh, there they are. And you hop out and you're instantly on this trail hiking through them. So very easy access, and they are absolutely spectacular. These trees are really a sight to behold. They are so high up in the mountains. They are weather beaten to the extreme, and they take on these amazing twisted and tortured forms. They're all kind of leaning because the prevailing wind through the mountain makes them all the branches kind of go in one direction. They're really big and chunky at the base, and then they come very spindly and up at the top. Very, very, very cool trees. And they do get quite old. There's one particular tree at Mount Goliath that has been dated to have started growing in the year 403, which that's a long time ago. The oldest confirmed Rocky Mountain bristlecone pine is 2,465 years old. But again, there is speculation that they could reach an age of 3,000 years old, just like the foxtail pine. So, I keep saying these numbers. They don't make any sense that a tree can live this long. I mean, this is just so long. And interestingly, though, especially to live in such harsh conditions, but it seems like interestingly, the harsh conditions are somehow what accounts for their long life. The Rocky Mountain bristlecone also does grow at lower elevations, but when it grows in what I think we would all consider nicer, calmer, more hospitable conditions, it only lives to be about 300 years old. Only. I mean, that's still crazy long time. But to go 10 times longer, to go from 300 years to 3,000 when you're in harsher conditions is just really fascinating. So I want to get on to the third species, though, the Great Basin bristlecone pine. Now, part of the reason I think some people don't even realize that there are different species of bristlecone pine is that up until 1971, this wasn't even considered a different species. There were just bristlecone pines. But taxonomy work revealed that these three different sort of populations actually are different species. And of course, people are free to disagree with the definition of species, and no, they're all the same. But officially right now, they're all three different species. This one actually has a couple different names. It's also known as the Intermountain bristlecone pine and the Western bristlecone pine. Remember, they were really only made distinct in 1971, so I guess we're still settling on a common name that everyone can agree on. What we can agree on is the scientific name. They are officially known as Pinus longavia, and they can be found in the states of California, Nevada, and Utah. They are nowhere near as tall as the coastal redwoods we started talking about. They max out at 15 meters or just 50 feet high. I mean, that's still a good sized tree, but nothing like the 300 some foot high coastal redwoods there. And the base on these, they can get about 3.6 meters or 12 feet wide. That's, so you think about if it's that's 3.6 meters wide and 15 meters tall, they're pretty squat, wide trees. And they seem like they often, and this accounts for some of that width, they often seem to grow in multi-trunk clusters, which you might be tempted to think is some kind of genetic quirk they have. But one of the really cool things I learned is that scientists think that there's so many multi-trunk trees because the seeds are actually planted by the bird, the Clark's nutcracker. And Clark's nutcrackers will cache a bunch of the seeds in one spot for later use. And if they don't get back to them and they don't get eaten, they'll all germinate together and then end up growing as this big multi-trunk tree. So it's not that there's anything genetically they like to grow in multi-trunks. It's probably pretty much just down to this bird hiding their seeds together.
So in that case, it's actually a bunch of genetically distinct individuals who
Yeah, it
have
would be.
like
I mean,
fused together.
They would be genetically distinct. They may come from similar parent material, but even
Sure.
within a parent material, the seeds are going to be genetically distinct because of the process of reproduction. You end up making slight variations, so they're not going to be clones or anything like that. You would have multi-trunks, and they're all from different seeds. Could even be from different parent plants as well. I mean, different of the same species, right? But different, from different trees. So that is very, very cool. Now, what everyone really wants to know, though, is, okay, how old do they get? So we have a bit of a mystery on our hands, and this is just really intriguing. There's an official answer and an unofficial answer. The official answer, officially, the oldest Great Basin bristlecone pine is a tree in the ancient bristlecone pine forest in the White Mountains of California. There you will find a tree known as Methuselah. This singular tree has been officially documented as being 4,856 years old, which makes it the oldest non-colonial species on Earth. And I say non-colonial because we talked about Pando and some other things on this show where you have these species like aspen that have been regenerating from the same rootstock for 10,000 years, but any one tree is actually very young. This is a singular species, a singular specimen that is 4,856 years old, which just is mind-boggling. Now, I do promise a mystery. So this mystery involves a man named Tom Harlan. And this isn't just some random guy who's like, I found an old tree. He was a researcher with the Laboratory of Tree Ring Research. So this was his job, is to age trees. And he studied another tree, also in the White Mountains, in 1957, that he claimed he dated to be 5,062 years old. Back in 1957. All right?
Right.
Now, understandably, he kept the location of this tree a secret in order to protect it. A lot of like the biggest trees, the oldest trees, a lot of times people don't say where these are. Like Hyperion, we talked about, is the, I believe the biggest coastal redwood. We know what forest it's in, but nobody is saying exactly where because they don't want somebody to want to get famous by cutting it down. And humans are kind of stupid like that. So it's possible.
Could be jerks that way.
So he kept the tree a secret where it was. He did actually confirm the tree was still alive fairly recently in 2010. I think someone asked him about it and he's like, yep, I went out and checked on it.
He's still around.
It's still there. Well, here's the thing. Unfortunately, Tom Harlan passed away in 2013 without telling anyone the location of the tree.
Okay.
And no one has been able to locate the tree he studied. They've never been able to locate the core sample he took to count the rings back in 1957. At first, when I heard like they couldn't find the core samples, I'm like, okay, that seems a little suspicious. And they go, what? No, but he dated them back in 1957. Like, I can understand how maybe those samples wouldn't still be around. So sadly, that record will have to remain unofficial, but it is amazing to think that, you could be, what would that be, about 5,100 years old or so for these trees, which is absolutely mind-boggling. There is no denying that these trees can live an amazingly, amazingly long time.
Did you do any little timeline research for us, Kirk?
I sure did. I sure did.
5,100 years ago.
You know me so well.
So
5,000 years ago was the very beginning of the Bronze Age, just for reference. Humans were just starting to develop a new technology called writing. So these trees basically predate written language, which is like, what? That is amazing. Stonehenge was just being created when this tree was sprouting out of a seed. Although that's not like the stone blocks we think of as Stonehenge. That's just the big circular ditch that became Stonehenge was being dug. The stones were not put up until this tree was already about 500 years old. That's I'm talking about Methuselah here, if we ignore the even older one. So older than, the stones at Stonehenge being put up. For reference, when the Great Pyramid of Giza was built in the 2250 BC. Some of these bristlecone pines that are still alive today were already about 750 years old. So they were already old trees
Oh my
by the
gosh.
time the pyramids were built. And when Stonehenge was built. So we think of these just absolutely ancient historic landmarks. And these trees are, they were essentially old by any other standard, not by bristlecone pine standard, but by any other tree standard. These trees were already old when those things were built, which
Amazing.
simply stunning. These are absolutely amazing trees. Like I said, we're gonna try to get some photos up on Instagram, not only of the redwoods that Rachel's seen, but get some bristlecone pine pictures up because they're just absolutely gorgeous. And if you ever have the opportunity to see a bristlecone pine of any of these species in the wild, be sure to do so. Standing amongst such ancients is incredibly humbling in a different way than standing under the redwoods, which just makes you feel tiny, but in a different way. So they're both equally profound and humbling experiences to be in the presence of these species. So that's what I have. My sources this week were mainly a variety of Wikipedia articles that have really nicely pulled together a lot of the sources. So feel free to check those out if you want to learn more. But that's what I got for you.
Very cool. Thank you, Kirk.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll find out what Victoria has for us.
All organisms, to some degree, are intelligent problem solvers. It's just they've evolved to solve different kinds of problems.
And whole ecosystems of working together, that's an intelligent social phenomenon.
For all the talk about the age of information, we're really entering the age of nature. Nature's Genius is a new podcast series from the Bioneers. It explores how the solutions we need are present in the sentient symphony of life. Starting February 18th, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, everybody, we're back. A few months ago in episode 198, I did a story, if you remember, on the various ways that XX and XY chromosomes in humans don't always work the way we were taught in school.
Absolutely.
And some of the many different ways that people can be intersex or have a physiological sex that's different than their chromosomes. And Kirk, you in episode 187 talked about how the Y chromosome might be gradually disappearing.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. Well, today I have another chromosome story that's possibly even weirder than that.
All right.
And, even though in humans, biological sex is like a little more complicated, as I discussed, because of these relatively rare chromosomal and hormonal differences, still, humans and other mammals in general, like we can say there's a mating system that's based on two sexes.
Sure,
right?
sure.
XY males and XX females.
Yeah, in general, yeah.
In the rest of nature, of course, there are other ways of doing sex determination.
Yeah, there are.
A lot of reptiles and amphibians, in addition to having sex chromosomes, or sometimes instead of having sex chromosomes, the temperature at which their eggs are gestated can determine the sex, which is a whole other cool topic.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm talking about today.
Okay. I wondered.
Birds generally have two sexes that are also based on a chromosome system, but their chromosome system is different. It's kind of like the opposite. So the chromosomes are called W and Z.
Right.
And so in birds, it's the males that have two of the same chromosome. They're ZZ and females are ZW. So
Gotcha.
the W is the one that determines the sex of the little baby bird.
Fascinating.
So, Kirk, as you talked about in your Y chromosome episode, we believe that sex chromosomes evolved or mutated, I guess, from regular chromosomes.
Sure.
And the X chromosome, which is like the female chromosome in
the
mammals,
intact
or the
chromosome,
Z chromosome in birds. And it's the intact one. It's like the same size as other ones. It looks basically the same. The Y and the W chromosomes are weird and small and have had a lot of mutations and have lost a lot of genes.
Yeah.
And kind of don't do a lot other than determine sex. So for the regular ones, the ones that are more like regular chromosomes, they do swap genes during meiosis the way that other chromosomes do. Like, because during meiosis, that's when the sperm and egg cells are created, and that's when you get chromosomes crossing over. That's why, kids look different than their parents, and you get that recombination of genetic material.
Yep. Yeah.
But an X and a Y can't swap with each other because they're not the same shape.
Yeah.
They're too different. So this means, the mutations have developed over many years in the Y chromosome or in the W chromosome in birds. So today I'm actually going to talk about a bird that is doing things differently than that even. And this bird has 4 sexes.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
This is going to be amazing.
And I think you're going to be surprised, Kirk, to hear what this bird is, because it is a very familiar bird to those of us living in the eastern half of North America.
Okay.
It is the white-throated sparrow.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know this story. I had not, I didn't think that's where you were going with it, but these birds are fascinating. I'm excited to talk about it.
So for those of you who are not familiar with the white-throated sparrow, it's a fairly common bird. It's, it's a sparrow. It's a little brown bird. They have a white throat patch.
It's a good name.
It's known, go figure. It has a pretty...
Sometimes they're not, right? So we need to call it out when they are.
True. Even for people who don't know a lot of bird songs, I think its song is pretty recognizable. It goes, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada."
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the mnemonic. And it's long been recognized that there are 2 different morphs, so-called, of the white-throated sparrow. One with more bright coloring. It has white stripes on its head, a brighter yellow patch on its head, and the other is a bit duller colored. The stripes are tan. And unlike with many bird species, it's not that the male is brighter and the female is duller. There are males and females of both morphs, and within a morph, the males and females look identical. But we have learned, based particularly on the research of a couple of married biologists named Elena Tuttle and Rusty Gonser, these 2 morphs actually have different behaviors and mating patterns.
Yeah.
Particularly in the males. So white-striped males are better singers. They're more aggressive, more promiscuous. In fact, they calculated that about 2/3 of the chicks that they fathered were not with their nestmate.
Okay.
And they also don't show very good parental care. They're not really spending a lot of time taking care of their chicks in their nest.
Interesting.
The tan-striped males, on the other hand, are spending more of their energy on raising their chicks and less energy on so-called, extramarital affairs.
Cavorting. I think in bird terms, the term is extra pair coupling.
Yes. They also didn't sing as much.
Huh.
So these are 2 different reproductive strategies that you see in nature. And in the case of these sparrows, they're pretty much equally successful. It's just a different way of going about getting your genes out there and surviving. Here's where it gets weird. White-striped birds only mate with tan-striped birds, and vice versa.
Yeah. It's so weird.
Yeah. The offspring of these pairings are about half white-striped and half tan-striped.
Mm-hmm.
And each subtype of bird, like say you're a male white-striped bird, you can only mate with female tan stripes. So each type of bird can only mate with 1/4 of the population.
Yeah.
Which is like having
so weird.
4 sexes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never really heard it described as having 4 sexes, but it kind of is, yeah. That's wild.
Well, and it's not just the behavior patterns that I just described. So when you start to look at things on a cellular level, it starts to make even more sense.
Okay, yeah,
so
tell us about it.
It turns out that for this bird, there's a section of their second chromosome, chromosome 2, that has a genetic mutation. This whole, a chunk of an arm of the chromosome has been flipped.
Okay.
And because of that changed orientation, it cannot pair up and cross over during meiosis.
Oh.
So there's this whole section that's getting passed down.
Okay.
And no meiosis is happening, so mutations are accumulating, and that's apparently where those behavior differences and the color differences, the genes for those, are located.
Okay.
And so scientists believe that basically we are watching the development of a new sex chromosome.
I had not heard that like part of. I've known about the two color morphs, and I knew that they like only mate with the other one, and I knew that. So that's sort of because you sort of say, well, why if this is a variation, does it not get bred out? Essentially, it's like, well, because they only mate with the other one, so every nest is a mix of the two, right? I had not heard this whole thing about how it's basically the development of a new sex chromosome happening before our eyes. That is,
yes.
I have so many questions, Victoria. Like, and maybe you can't answer them. Like, what are there implications? Does this have certain implications in terms of like long term? What could, like, is there an end game here? Like, it's just...
Well, good question.
Okay.
So one of the articles that I was reading, which was, a more of a popular science article discussing the scientific paper, quoted another researcher who was basically saying that he thought, of course, we haven't looked that closely, but we don't know of any other 4 sex mating systems in nature.
Sure.
Which would indicate that it's probably not a very stable arrangement.
Yeah.
And so this researcher was speculating that
especially if populations get low, it would be especially dangerous if you can't find a mate.
Yeah, instead of being able to mate with half the population, you can only mate with a quarter of the population. You can see how that would be a problem, potentially.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So there's a possibility that one of these sex chromosomes, maybe the new one or maybe the old one, is going to get, it's just going to die out.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you look in nature, there are a lot of 2-sex systems. There are quite a few that have 2 sexes and a hermaphrodite, or 1 sex and a hermaphrodite. But we don't know of any other 4-sex mating systems. So it's just something unusual. And we probably won't live long enough to see what happens.
That's once again, I implore our listeners, join our Patreon so we can finally fund our time machine so we can get these answers for you. I want to go ahead in time and find out like what happens to the white-throated sparrows. And so come on, we can do it. We're gonna build a time machine. We can. I'm
leaving you on a bit of a cliffhanger here.
Oh my gosh, time will tell. Here's the deal: the Bristlecone Pines will know.
They will. We'll just have to leave them a note or something.
Okay.
All right. My sources this week were that article I mentioned called "The Sparrow with 4 Sexes" that was in like a news article in Nature from November of 2016. And the paper is "Divergence and Functional Degradation of a Sex Chromosome Like Supergene" by Elena Tuttle et al. From February 2016 in Current Biology.
So cool. Thanks for bringing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And since Rachel isn't here, that is all we have this week.
That's it. Short and sweet. We will be back next week. Rachel will not be back next week. She's going to be gone for a little bit here while we're with just you and me for 2 shows in a row. Pretty fun.
Yep.
I will see everybody here next time. Victoria will see everybody here next time. And until then, be weird.
Yeah, stay weird, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach us by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can check out our website, strangebynaturepodcast.com, and you can support the show and get ad-free episodes at patreon.com/strangebynature. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.